Welcome. My name is Steve Levitt. I am the moderator of this panel. My day job is as a professor at the University of Chicago, but I moonlight as part of the coalition called Data Science for Everyone, which is a very eclectic, broad-based coalition of folks, educators, philanthropists, corporations trying to bring data science into education. So I want to talk about two housekeeping pieces before we get started with the actual things. If you want to click on that QR code, it will connect you to our Data Science for Everyone propaganda, and you can then become part of the movement with us. And secondly, if you want a more hands-on indoctrination, there is a meet and greet at 2 p.m. In room 13AB, where we will be to talk at greater length about these kinds of issues. So without further ado, let each of the panelists make their own introductions. One last thing, if you have the app and want to ask questions, I'm looking at it right now. I'll try to integrate questions you have throughout the hour. I'd rather have us answering the questions on your mind than the questions on my mind any day. So please keep the questions coming. But let's start with introductions. Suyen, why don't you lead us up?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Awesome. My name is Suyen Machado, and I am the director of the Data Science Education Project at UCLA. I've been a former educator, math teacher in particular, administrator, and recently I've been working at UCLA to bring this data science to K-12 education. Afua?
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, just confirming that it is still morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Afua Bruce. I'm faculty at Carnegie Mellon University with their Masters of Public Policy program, specifically with students who are looking to integrate data science and public policy together. And really excited to be here for this conversation today. To you.
Good morning. I'm Karina Edmonds, and I'm a senior VP at SAP. So I represent the industry side. And I lead academies and university alliances, and we have a number of programs to inspire young children to build their digital skills. And so I'm really excited to be here and be part of this conversation.
Okay, great. So let me just start by saying I have one complaint, and that is with the title of the session. Because obviously in 2032, work will be data-centric, but work is already data-centric. I mean, to think that we aren't already in that position, I think, is a mistake. So let me start with you, Karina, because you're in the front lines. You're at a company that lives and dies with data, but you've also been in many other settings. How important is data science to the future of this country?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the reason I'm here today. We already are seeing the shortage of skilled labor as data scientists in data science positions. And so this is why I think it's so critical that we start at an early stage for children to start to get them exposed to data and not be afraid of data because it's all around us. The amount of data that we are collecting every day is mind-boggling. And so I also have an interest to make sure that the folks who are collecting the data, processing the data, and interpreting the data are diverse, and that represents a wider swath of our society, because right now I think it's a very small group of people that are at the table creating the algorithms that often have biases in them. So that's also my interest, again, to make sure that we have everybody at the table in the future.
So one thing that I observe is presently the complete mismatch between the demand for data scientists and the supply of data scientists. So, for instance, I have a little tiny company. We're trying to hire a data scientist, and the headhunter said to us, given what you want, which I said I want a good data scientist, said they'll cost you about $400,000 or $500,000 a year. Okay, so clearly there is a shortage in the market of data scientists. But I think we're not in this session. I don't want to focus this on professional data scientists. I think we're talking about something much broader, which is that every job increasingly relies on data, whether it's salespeople, managers, being an auto mechanic. I mean, modern automobiles are essentially computers. So I don't want to miss out on that. But Afua, you've been on the front lines try to do data science to benefit humanity. So could you talk a little bit about what you've seen with what data, I don't know, whatever, the power of data science, or how you think about the problem?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've had the privilege of doing data science at the federal government level, at the city government levels, and also with a number of nonprofits around the world. I was recently the Chief Program Officer of DataKind, which is a nonprofit based in New York City that does data science in service of humanity. And so essentially working with nonprofits all around the US, but honestly all around the world. DataKind had or has a community of about 20,000 people on every continent except Antarctica. And what's exciting about that is because there's so many organizations who have missions that are very social centric, very in service of humanity, whether it's partnering with food pantries to see what type of data science and analytics can be done to help food pantries predict when they'll encounter surges, so when they need to have more volunteers working, or when they need to order more food, or when they need to redistribute the food across the different food pantries in a city, or whether it's working with organizations delivering healthcare in many African countries on what's the most efficient route to deliver the healthcare so you can do things more quickly, more efficiently, and save cost and the very precious fuel cost. Or even if it's working with universities and partnering with universities to identify students who are at risk of dropping out after they've completed most of their college, the credits they need to graduate. What then can you do? What interventions are possible so that you can meet those students, intervene, and make sure that they can graduate, get those jobs, and really affect the course of their lives and their families' lives. So those are some of the projects that we were able to do at DataKind, and I think it really speaks to how data science doesn't need to just be held in certain sectors, but really can be used to tackle some of the greatest problems that we're facing as a society today.
Okay, so Zachary asked a good question from the audience. What do we mean by data-centric? And I'll give my answer. I'm not really sure. I think I'm kind of making that up. And I think that's one of the challenges in this area is that everyone's got a different definition of what data science is or should be. But does anyone any of you want to give your own definitions? And maybe we can play with that a little bit?
It's really so broad and obviously cuts across, as Afua just mentioned, like every career, every every field, really. So to me, it's just about the collection of data, the processing of this data, the visualization, the interpretation, and how it's applied, which, like I said, in every aspect of our life, more and more data is being collected about us. And so it's really broad for me, the way that I see data and data science. The jobs are different in terms of, if you're a data scientist versus a data engineer or even a computer scientist. But really, I think we're all on the same page in terms it's about the handling of data, those basic skills that are going to be needed.
And I think, and I kind of adding to that, I think of different levels. So there's a professional data scientist who's proficient at modeling, asking the right questions, able to merge data sets and be flexible in platforms. And then there might be someone more like a data analyst where you're comfortable with data, maybe you work in Excel, you're able to ask questions and maybe run randomized experiments. And then there's a third level, which I think, to me, should be a goal for every citizen, which is if I read the newspaper and someone makes a data-related argument, I can kind of make sense of it. I can see obvious mistakes. I know the difference between correlation and causality, so I can't be tricked as easily. So for me, I think of this movement, the importance of this movement, as being at least as centered in kind of the role of being a citizen or your own private life, like choosing between healthcare programs or just being able to make smart decisions about financial trade-offs and things, which are all, I think, kind of embedded. But yeah.
No, I was just going to say that to me, data-centric means being able to make decisions using some kind of data. And that's a really important skill for every person to have. not just companies are increasingly making decisions based on data, but in education, we're making decisions based on data. And if we're not careful in asking those questions and interrogating that data, we may leave people behind. And so we need to be critical about decisions that are made with data and also utilize the data to make those decisions. So it has to be a both kind of thing.
Okay, so let me take another question that we've got here from the audience. How does data science relate or integrate with all of the recent activities with the following movements: computer science, computational thinking, and metacognition? Suyen, you're probably good on that one.
So I'd say it's very well integrated. As a matter of fact, I think we have teachers in the audience, and if you are a computer science teacher and you're teaching the AP Computer Science Principles course, one of those 7 big ideas is data. And data is not just important in learning computer science, but also the part of working with data that has the statistics component. So it is integrated in the sense that you're using digital tools for data that was collected digitally, and so there is an integration there. And so data science, I don't think you can separate it from computer science or computational thinking. You actually need computational thinking in order to do some of those methods that include the digital tools and the data that was collected digitally.
Okay, but let me, I want to ask a question. So, Afua, you've worked in STEM,
Yes.
in government, all sorts of settings. And as of late, there's been an interesting tension, I would say, developing between data science and other STEM activities. And in particular, in California, there's been this idea that data science should replace, it should, push calculus to the side. And I would say it's caused a rift within a set of people who usually would all agree on the same thing. So, do you have an opinion at all about the extent to which data science should be seen as in opposition to other STEM things, or, that, anyway, do you have thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I always have thoughts. So I think, so first we should recognize that data is a part of STEM. They're not in conflict because it's a part of STEM. I think also, I think there's a temptation now to think that, pre the emergence of data science, everyone saw STEM as the same thing, and we were all on the same page then, and now it's a big fight between STEM and data science. But a few years ago, there's a fight between STEM and computer science, there's STEM and STEAM, and so I think also it's important to recognize that how we talk about this collection of skills that can develop into different ways of applying things, different ways of tackling different problems, is always somewhat evolving. Some of the same tools that we use, though, are consistent. We'll need students to understand how to reason, how to do logic, how to do math, have some basic understanding of science in order to then proceed in advanced engineering, in data science, and in a number of other disciplines. And so I think looking at data science as part of STEM overall might be the way to go.
And I totally agree with everything Afua said, but I would add that I think in the past, some math, and specifically calculus, as you mentioned, was seen as a filter. And we don't want to create those filters when it comes to data science. And I think that's where the issue lies. And so finding a way not to create this filter where you're leaving a lot of people, away from the table is I think, where, like I said, the conflict lies. And I think, I agree, they're not in opposition. They're not mutually exclusive. And we need to work together to see how we move forward.
So a lot of people are putting a lot of hope that data science will be good in terms, in saying education system in terms of equality, right? That data science might be a pathway that is more equitable than say the calculus, algebra 2 pathway has been. So I actually think the opposite. Just being totally honest, I mean, I don't want it to be, but I actually have the opposite thing. And my sense is because I am struck at how incredibly difficult it is to think about how you're going to introduce data science, like all the moving pieces. And so let me start with you, Suyen, because you, of like anyone on the planet, probably Suyen has had more experience trying to figure out how to make a data science program work on the ground. Could you talk about how you spent the last 10 years of your life? I think that's a good start in for having a conversation about what's realistic and then what we will do, what we should or could do to hit two big objectives. One is training a workforce that will be prepared for the world around them and doing it in a way that's equitable. And those are obviously two completely different things.
Yeah. So any time something new comes up or it's seen as new, you're going to face resistance. And that's kind of like a fact of life, right? Especially in our educational system. So, we have to find those opportunities where, we can work with all stakeholders almost at the same time. So in my experience, I've been working, bringing data science, we didn't call it data science at the time, but more like working with data to students. Specifically at the high school level was our first target for 10 years. And we created a course called Introduction to Data Science in response to what we saw as an emerging need for people, just the average consumer, to be able to discern those messages that are being put out that have to that were done using data. And so, my work was primarily with the Los Angeles Unified School District and UCLA. And it took a lot of education of all the stakeholders. You got to start with obviously leadership, but also the grassroots, the teachers as well, because, what do you mean by data science? What is that? What are we talking about? What do I have to do? So that is important. Another big component in our educational system are counselors. Counselors also need to be educated. And first and foremost, parents. Parents need to be involved. This is, after all, their children's education. And so they also need to understand why this is important. So it's a concerted effort. It is an effort because, like I said earlier, it's something new. It's gonna face resistance. We've been doing things this way for, the geometry sandwich for 50 years, right? So, what do you mean? How do you rationalize a change or the addition of something when schools are already impacted? And so we need to find ways of working it in. For teachers in particular, removing barriers and providing support. In removing barriers, I am talking about things like if we're going to provide digital tools, provide them the tools. Don't make them, install a program, run it through web browsers, because we know that digital tools are important in the study of data. So we need to remove those barriers. Also, barriers for students, such as prerequisites. Those are some things that keep students from taking some courses. And so those are some of the things that we also need to look at. Providing support to teachers. If it's something new, they need to feel like they have their questions answered along the way. What's the type of professional development that we are going to provide teachers so that they feel equipped to teach this new thing with modern tools, with instructional strategies embedded in them so that students find the content engaging and relevant. In our course, for example, we have this data collection method that we call participatory sensing, where students act as human sensors. And so they're the ones collecting the data. And what this does is it demystifies the data for students. Now students know where the data come from. It's coming from themselves. And they are more engaged and are more interested in analyzing, hey, what are my food eating patterns? What do I eat salty or sweet snacks more? One more than the other, and things like that.
Wait, can I pause you for 1 second?
Yes.
Because you talked about teachers. So one of the top questions we have here is how in the world are we going to get enough teachers or trained teachers? And so I know you mentioned it, but can you actually just pause and talk about that for like 2-4 minutes about what you do with IDS to train teachers? And then also I want you to answer the question, is that feasible at scale, or do we need a different approach than what IDS has done?
Okay, so in my 20 plus years of experience in education, I know the importance of professional development and teacher support. And so when we created the IDS, the Introduction to Data Science course, one of the things that we built into it was that professional development and support. And so for our course specifically, our teachers commit to that first year of implementation to 9 days of full day professional development. And in the second year, they come to us for 4 additional days of professional development, where it's a steep learning curve because we're talking about using digital tools with modern methodology and methods to analyze data. And so teachers need to feel confident with the content and the pedagogy. And so a well-designed, well-structured program, professional development program will incorporate all of that.
Okay, and your program now uses R.
Yes.
The teachers are supposed to learn R in 13 days? Or how do the teachers learn R? I think that's the challenge to me as I look at this.
Yeah.
It's really easy to say, we'll give easy. Somehow we'll find 13 days of professional development, but it still doesn't answer the question of how they're going to learn to program.
Yeah. So most of our teachers, believe it or not, they've never even heard of R. R is one of the programming languages that statisticians and academics use to analyze data. And so our high school students use R they start learning to use R. I mean, they're not like professionals because it's just one course. One course is not going to get you ready for a whole career, but it gets you started. And so teachers come to us and they haven't even heard of it. And so, 13 days in 2 years is not enough. But as they're implementing the program and the kids are working through the labs, the RStudio is a platform we use, the RStudio labs, and they're learning to code, the teachers are kind of like one step ahead, right? But that's a testament to the teachers, right? Their willingness to learn this for the benefit of the students and in order to have a workforce that's better prepared in working with data and doing all of what Karina said, asking the right questions, considering the data, collecting the data, analyzing it, and finally interpreting it.
So, so teachers are obviously a big, professional development is a big obstacle. I think another difficult point is that the universities have traditionally looked for calculus background, and parents and children, I think, are not well placed to make hard choices about what they should be studying in their future and what. So Karina, I have a question for you. I mean, you're on the business side. I think there's an enormous need. I don't know how we would put parents and students in a position to make smart choices, but it seems like it's really, businesses, people like you at SAP, you can see what's needed, and somehow we need to communicate that. Do you have any ideas in that dimension?
Yes, Steve, thanks. I don't know a lot of students that go around going, I want to be a data scientist, right? And so that's where we would like students to be. And I think a lot of that is exposing them to what a data science degree could lead to and the immense opportunities.
Could you tell your own story? I mean, not a data science story, but it's, how'd you get into science?
Sure. So I've been a huge advocate of STEM. So when I came to the U.S. From the Dominican Republic, a math teacher in 6th grade realized I had a special aptitude in math, and she nominated me for a program, which this is in Providence, Rhode Island. It was called to increase minorities in math and engineering and science. And through that program, I got to visit with engineers. I had no idea what engineers did, but everyone that I met seemed to have a living wage and was doing something super interesting. So I decided I would be an engineer. And I have to say, because I felt like it would have a lot of opportunities, and I did not even imagine the number of opportunities that have been available to me as an engineer. And I just want to make sure that I see the future in data science, and I want to make sure that kids understand the opportunities that are available. I mean, like I said, in every job, you mentioned SAP, like our sales folks, everybody has to have some background in data science. And I love that you can apply to social issues as well. So if you are into environmental issues, if you're into biology, art, every field, you will have to have some basic understanding of data science. But really, ultimately, what I would love to see kids is understand the opportunities that are available through a data science career.
And do you think that SAP might want to be on the cutting edge of
Yes,
helping make it easier for kids?
Absolutely, and not just SAP, like we have a huge ecosystem that I really think that everybody should be on board, and this is something that companies can easily collaborate on because everybody needs a skilled workforce. It's not just SAP, like I said, also our ecosystem. So one of the things we do, we have a program called Young Thinkers that shows we have a programming language called Snap. It's built on Scratch. And again, trying to expose 12 to 16-year-olds to programming and digital skills. So we do have a program. I think we could do more. We now have an online cybersecurity internship for high school students. But I think we could do more. And we're up to the challenge. We did sign up last year. We have a partnership with the 49ers. What kid doesn't like to look at sports data, right? And yeah, that's another huge area where data obviously plays a big role and has been for a long time. So, yeah.
So the top question here is from Kristen, and I have to say I don't 100% understand it. Can you all discuss the differences of needs for schools to prepare all to be part of data literate society and to build data science workforce skills for some? Kristen, would you mind just clarifying that question? Because it seems like an important question.
Sure. So what I'm trying to ask is, what are the differences that we need our teachers to be able to prepare all students to be data literate citizens versus some of our students who are going to become professional scientists or work with data professionally? And are those different? Do those happen at different levels of our K-12 system? Are there different skills, different courses? If you could, does that help?
Yeah, I love that question. Let me start, and then I'm going to throw out a challenge to Suyen. So at Data Science for Everyone, we've been trying to put together guidelines for how you would teach data ideas from K all the way through 12. So trying to make it integrated as part of just the standard things that you would learn. Now, what's interesting is that I've come to believe, in conflict with many people within data science, that if we want to make this available to everyone, that spreadsheet-based programs are going to be the answer. That it's too difficult to train teachers in programming languages, it's too hard to teach kids to program, and that we should be focused, and that sort of for the all, that we should have in mind a spreadsheet-based thing. Now, this is why I'm going to say Suyen, because Suyen and her team have elected to go the opposite direction. So IDS, this amazing curriculum they developed, is R-based. And Rob Gould, who you work with, when I suggested, who's a professor at UCLA of statistics, when I suggested to Rob that we should redo IDS with a spreadsheet, he practically fell off his chair. He said, that's not data science. I mean, you're crazy. So I will tell you what we did is, because it's open source, the whole curriculum, we just did it ourselves. And we were able to replicate about 90 to 95% of what's done with R in Google Sheets. And we think that that offers important benefits. Okay, but I want to give you the chance, Suyen, to tell me that I'm wrong and that that's not the way to go.
Well, I'm not going to say you're wrong. I just don't think that it's an either-or proposition, right? So, Kristen, I believe your name is, you're talking about what the differences are. I think that, getting students to understand some of these concepts, maybe using sheets, it's one way of doing it. But then if you want students to see, what are some of those tools that professionals use, they could, be geared more toward a course like the one that we have with R, right? And so, especially in underrepresented communities, a lot of students don't get these opportunities to go into courses where they could see what other possibilities are there for careers other than, traditional doctor, lawyer, blah, 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 right? We first developed this course for the Los Angeles Unified School District, and kids were going in there and said, I had no idea I could work with data, and I had no clue that I could actually learn a programming language. Like, that was not, it didn't even cross my mind. And some of these kids decide, I'm gonna go more into the data science, maybe the data analyst route, more data science-y. Others, maybe not, but at least they have that access and they have the opportunity to see what it's like. And so for those students that are gonna go more of the, into data science or more into the data analyst route, they can see they're prepared, they have the R experience, and they get to use those methods that the people in perhaps industry or academia are using. And so it's not an either or, it's a both and depending, this is where counselors come in and are very important. It depends on the students' choices and what career paths they want or they think they want at the time that they're counseled.
I would just say, if I had my choice, the way I would put this into schools would be to follow a process that we call merge and purge. So I'd take the existing math framework, and I would take the best of Algebra 1, Geometry, Trigonometry, Algebra 2. I would take the best 2/3 of all those courses and keep them. And I would cull out the third that's dated, that's not helpful anymore, that was useful in a pre-computer world for computation, hand computations, but not anymore. And that would free up something like a year. And I would take that 9th grade, I would do it in 9th grade, I would make 9th grade math not algebra or geometry, or I would make it a kind of I might do some algebra, but mainly I'd make it like a statistics, data science, financial literacy, rudimentary programming. And the reason I would put data science early into the high school experience, or even into the middle school experience, is I think that much of what we're talking about in some sense, it's applied common sense. It's like the difference between correlation and causality. And it's a set of basic tools that I think only come to life, not in a sterile math sequence, but when applied in a humanities class or in a history class, a social science class. And so I would like to equip students with a basic set of tools so that we then would integrate data science everywhere. And then I would take what Suyen has done and I would make that the capstone. For the kids who are really interested and who become engaged over time, I would make a dedicated, AP-like demanding data science class the capstone.
Can I push back on you a little bit?
Yes, sure. Good.
Okay. So, in my experience, once you have like an AP course, just the AP just filters out a bunch of kids. And one of the things that we wanted to do when we created IDS was make it accessible to all. And we did include R because a lot of the students who would have never seen R would never have seen it had we done it in honors class or had we created it as an AP course. And so that is the pushback that I have for you, is that one of the things that we want to do was really remove the student type barriers so that any student who wanted to take it could come in and take it. And interestingly, we had students who call themselves like, bad at math. They took our course, they really liked the programming, and they went back the STEM route. So, it's for me specifically, since I was one of the designers of the course, that was really, really important for all students to have that access. And why not the R programming language, which is really important in the data science industry.
Yeah,
I think one of the,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Just, I have a quick pushback. It's just like, I would love to see that course start earlier. Like, I think 9th grade, you've already lost a lot of people. Why not 6th or 7th, actually? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that we've touched on here is just the importance of taking data science and applying it to problems that students are thinking about and students are engaging in. I think we can, broadly speaking for all STEM, but I think it's especially true for data science when you can center the work around community issues that people are facing, then you can have students who get excited about figuring out something like, I don't know, noise levels in their community or why there aren't bike lanes and what that looks like. And then from there you can say, okay, if that's a problem, let's figure out what data is involved. And now we can start to engage students around the data analysis that's there, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's R. But now we can engage students from there, and you've got something where students can make it really tangible on why it matters to them. That is one way that I think, especially when we talk about accessibility and increasing who has access and the ability to do this type of work, getting students at a young age to realize that connection is what will make a difference. There's organizations like Beta NYC in New York who does this with a lot of community-based programs, not just with students, but with anyone in the community who perhaps has never seen themselves before as a data person or a technologist, but knows they have something in their city that they don't like. And then through that process, they realize, well, now I understand how to get the data I want, how to pull that together, how to do the analysis, and how to make an argument. And I know I've seen that effective even at the middle school level. And so I think that connection to the issues, especially issues of social justice, I think, is a way to really pull students in, to really engage students and expose them to data science and perhaps change the trajectory of their studies.
Yeah, one last thought about that. In the classroom, students, especially in math classrooms, there's used to just sitting passively and the teacher being the one asking the questions. But with working with data, one of the things that students learn early on, especially in our course, is that they're the ones asking the questions. They're not waiting for the teacher to ask the questions. And so student agency is developed that way, where students are the ones that are asking the questions. It could be about the data they're collecting, about themselves, or it could be one of our official data sets that the students work with. So for example, they work with CDC Youth Behavior Risk Survey data is one of the data sets that they work with. And they explore the data, they look at the variables, and then they start asking questions. How many 16-year-olds wear a seatbelt every time they, depending on the variables of the data sets, and they become better at asking questions. And so when you marry that with, things that are important to students, you develop that student agency.
Yeah, so Marty asked a question. This is really Marty's question. We're talking about Marty's question, which was, how do we address equity and justice issues baked into data science? How do we make data science relevant and tractable to youth outside of the CS and math tracks? And I think that is, the great allure of data science is that you can ask interesting questions with it. What I think is a little bit unsolved is how you can lower the hurdles enough so that for people who are not on these tracks. So one thing, Suyen, you've seen, I'm putting words in your mouth, one thing you've seen is that the set of skills which can allow you to be an excellent data scientist are not necessarily the set of skills which are going to get you an A in Algebra 2. So I think that's a super important point, and that's exactly what you're seeing, right? It's that a lot of the kids who are taking IDS, your program, have not been particularly successful in the traditional math track, and are having more success as an alternative. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It's definitely a different set of skills. I would say still rigorous, but it's different. To me, it's like, I don't have any scientific studies about this, but it's just activating different parts of the brain, I think, when they're the ones asking the questions and they're the ones driving their own learning and learning the skills on how to answer their questions. And so it's a bit more successful.
Yeah, so here's a worry I have though. So there's been I've heard a lot of talk among people in this area about creating alternate tracks, right? There's a calculus track and the data science track, and the question is, how do we get the data science track elevated to be on the same level, the same importance as calculus? I'm actually terrified of that entire dialogue because I think, both because I don't think students and parents are equipped to make that choice, but number two, I really worry that any sort of bifurcation it's very difficult, I think, to have two tracks that are equal, right? I mean, like, not very often in life, we're like two tracks, and they're like, oh, either one's totally fine, take whichever one. So let me ask you, because you think a lot about technology and equity. Do you have any, do you think it's realistic that we could create alternate tracks and expect that in the end, equity would be the outcome?
So I might push back a little bit on the overall framing. I think what we are seeing more and more of is that when you start with issues and then bring in your STEM discipline, whether it's engineering, whether it's calculus, whether it's data science, that is when you are going to be able to engage more students overall. And you're seeing this in a number of engineering programs, especially at the collegiate level across the country, programs like engineering projects in community service. Sorry, I forgot the acronym halfway as I was talking. EPICS is the acronym. Sorry, forgetting what it is. But you see things like that. There's an organization in North Carolina called Code the Dream, which specifically looks to recruit people from traditionally underrepresented or overlooked communities and train them in engineering and then deploy them. And so they've done interesting things like taken people who are the children of migrant workers, and then they've gone on to develop apps and other programs that help distribute services and prepare services for migrant workers as they are moving across. And it's really that tie to the issue. So I think the same is true as we look to teach data science, really thinking through that. And so I think when we talk about issues of equity, we talk about issues of justice. Let's talk about what are the problems that we're equipping people to solve. Are we only looking and telling people that you can only solve a certain type of problem that with your data science skills, with your engineering skills, with your math skills? Or are we recognizing that, again, for these large issues that we're facing, these complicated issues, whether it's hunger, housing, or anything in between, a lot of different tools are going to have to come together. A lot of different skill sets are going to have to come together to be applied. And let's use that as the way in, as opposed to focusing on, here's the very specific algebra skills that you need, or the very specific calculus skills that you need, or even the very specific R knowledge that you need. But let's start with the problem. Let's teach people how to ask the right questions for the data science specifically, and let's go from there.
Yeah, and that's a great response. I would just want to add to that. A lot of times students will ask me, like, what should I study? I have no idea what to study. And I often refer to them like, what's a problem you want to solve? What's a problem that appeals to you? Because there's so many different roles in any problem, like climate change, right? You have the data scientists, you have the people collecting the data, analyzing the data. So I often, like I said, refer them to what is that problem you want to solve, where do you want to be? And I agree that social equity is, especially for underserved communities, holds a lot of interest. And that's a great way to look at it in terms of what's the problem you want to solve and what are those skills that you're going to need and where do you want to play in this.
So I agree wholeheartedly. The how, I think, is really hard, because I can see how you add data science into the math curriculum. And I can kind of see how you work hand in hand with social studies teachers to bring data science in. I mean, what you just described is, I think, exactly the right thing, which is you show students the power of data science for understanding and answering, maybe solving problems. But it's kind of, it bumps up into the idea, into the struggle with what do you, well, let me put it this way. Suyen, can you describe when you started in this 10 years ago, your first attempts, you tried to integrate data science into biology, okay? But and tell us about how that went, and are you more, and the answer's not gonna be very well. And then after you say that, will you answer, do you think in the modern, well, you might do better if you went back today, how would you try again to integrate data science into it? But first start about what you did.
Yeah, so in 2011, our original thought was to integrate these concepts, data science concepts that we call now, into existing biology and Algebra 1 classrooms. That was very difficult. Part of the reason is because teachers already have a set curriculum, and so it's really hard to bring in something new. Even though we tried the best that we could to integrate these data science concepts into what they were already teaching, right? But there's always a learning curve for the teachers, learning curve for the students, and most importantly at the time, if it wasn't on the state test, the teachers were not gonna touch it. They're not gonna teach it. High stakes test. And so, you know, we would start every summer training around 80 teachers, and by the time it was time to implement, we were down to about 20 teachers. And this was prior to Common Core. Common Core, one of the things we noticed right away is that statistics was being, there was a flashlight being, it was shining on statistics, and now statistics was in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, so it was throughout the high school curriculum, whereas before it wasn't. And so we decided, okay, it's really hard to compete with already set curriculum and high stakes tests, right? And so we decided to create this course. And at the time we were calling it a modern statistics course so that people kind of understood what we were trying to do. And because there was this increased attention towards statistics, we were trying to position it to solve a need. And the need was to create a more students who are able to think statistically. In my experience, statistics standards were the ones that teachers got to if there was time. So when students got to high school, you know, they were lucky if they even knew, you know, that there was a range in the data, what the word data meant, right? And so we created the course. It was really, really hard. Part of it was because, you know, statistics wasn't, I don't want to say valued, but really it wasn't as valued before in the old standards, but now it is with Common Core. And so I kind of, to your question, how would you do it? Like, I think you gotta step out to show what this is, and then now we can go backwards and start integrating it.
So let's say you wanted to integrate now with social studies.
Yeah.
If I gave you 10 years, you had 10 more years.
Yeah.
How would you try to take the big, important social questions and make the discussion of those in classrooms data-based?
Absolutely. There are a lot of parallels to the other disciplines, right? And so the way we view data science is a way of approaching problems or problem solving using data. And so in social studies, depending on what it is, and of course, you know, you have to take a look at the standards, but depending on what it is that the students are learning, you can take evidence, primary and secondary sources, and apply some of those data science skills to analyzing primary and secondary sources and things like that, like in in history or, whatever it is, whatever the problem is. And so you kind of go through a parallel, in our course, the students go through the data cycle, and then you have parallel cycles in the other disciplines, but through the lens of data. And you can use that so that students are able to make stronger arguments using data and really using that evidence to support their learning, to make cases for whatever problem they want to solve. And so now that people are understanding that data science is more like an approach to solving problems using data, data that is collected digitally using some digital tools, whether it be spreadsheets or art. The importance, somebody brought up computational thinking. Computational thinking is really important and all that, but ultimately to make, to solve those problems and using data and evidence to make those claims.
Okay, so a question from Josh. How do we ensure that resource-poor communities and schools don't get left behind in this push? And let me just say, at Data Science for Everyone, we have schools reach out to us. And the schools that reach out to us are the most elite schools in the country, are the ones that reach, completely predictably, they're the ones that are reaching out to us. And I think that's understandable at the beginning, that the kind of the schools with resources and will be the ones. But I don't know. How? I mean, obviously, LA Unified is, but do we have ideas about how to do that well? Is there a role for the federal government? I mean, you two were, let me put it this way, you were both in Washington. Optimistic or pessimistic that the federal government could be of any use in this regard?
What feels like a leading question. I would say I still live in DC. I still hold some optimism that there are policy levers that need to come into play here. Like you said, resource poor areas. So what programs, how can we redirect money to certain communities? How can we work through different levels of government to share that this information is out there, is available, and to what sort of funding vehicles we can put in place in order to give people in districts access to things. So I think that there are some specific policy levers that can be played. I also think there's a role to explore partnerships with the private sector. And so for your private sector counterparts, who I'll pass off to next, what roles they're willing to do. We've seen the private sector in the past make investments in different types of education, make some of their employees available, start different programs. I think there are also ways to explore some public-private partnerships. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm also optimistic. I think there's a role for everyone, so including the federal government. And as Afua mentioned, I do think there are policy levers that can be pulled. But yeah, the private sector, I think, as well. Along SAP, there's, before joining SAP, I was at Google, who had a big education department there as well. So yeah, and then this is an area where we can collaborate. Because, like I said, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but especially in the area of data science and engineering, there's a very low representation of underserved communities. And everyone wants a diverse workforce because diverse workforce has been shown to deliver better results. And years ago, somebody said, if, say, Google, SAP, we can't all meet like our diversity goals with the current pipeline. And so everyone really has an invested interest to make sure that these underserved communities are coming to the table, are provided the resources that they need to be able to eventually enter this field. And it starts very early, and that's why I push back on you, Steve, in terms of, the sooner that we can do that, the sooner that this pipeline will start to grow. So yeah, and it's something that we continue to do, and we bring our partners to the table as well. Everyone is interested in ensuring that, like I said, underserved communities, and that we have diverse representation at every level, So.
Okay, a question from Anonymous, and one that I echo. I'd love to hear more from Afua. How are we seeing data used and growing in service of humanity? the health, UN sustainability development. Are we seeing data science used to the betterment of humanity or to the detriment?
Well, also to the detriment, but also to the betterment of humanity. So thank you to Anonymous for this question. I will say I am very optimistic about the increase in sort of humanitarian uses for data. I think you're seeing it on a lot of different fronts right now, which is really exciting. So organizations like DataKind, DataKind 10 years ago was the only one that was sort of took donated time from private sector data scientists and then figured out how to structure problems and to develop partnerships with nonprofit organizations. There are now a number of organizations that are doing that across the world. You're also seeing a lot of companies start to have sort of data science for good programs as well. And so looking at how you expand that. And then I think it's also really exciting to see a lot of movement in the philanthropic space as well. And so there's been a lot of philanthropic dollars being poured into to support nonprofit organizations themselves in hiring the talent or developing the talent to become more data-centric and to leverage data science more. And you're really seeing this, I think, especially in the areas of environmental justice, climate change, criminal justice reform, and food security. And so there's a lot of investment and activity in those spaces. And then finally, I think also at the university level, a lot of universities, as they've started data science programs, are looking, their students really, are looking for problems that have a more social mission, have a more in service of humanity mission. And so you're seeing that drive from students, and that is then sort of pushing the universities to develop those partnerships and to really show lasting and sustainable work in the data science for good space. So I'm super excited.
And I should mention, just a few days ago, I was at UC Irvine as part of a panel for data science institutes that are being created at HBCUs.
Yeah.
In the past, the whole notion of data science and these data science centers was not so common. And so how do we help those communities come up to par and build strong data science institutes? So
Absolutely.
Great, so we just have a few minutes left. I want to give each of the panelists a chance to talk about one concrete step that they think that could be taken that will be helpful. So I'll just start. So I mentioned already what I call the merge and purge. I think a very sensible, concrete thing to do would be to merge and purge the existing map sequence to create room for this early on. But and the other one I throw in is what we're trying to do at Data Science for Everyone is create what we call bite-sized data, sort of bite-sized curriculum or content. Little one day or half an hour applications to important questions that history teachers or social science teachers, even, you're reading, you're reading a book, and then there's no reason that in English classes you couldn't bring this in. So that's something we're working on at Data Science for Everyone, is how we can create content, not curriculum, like Suyen said, but just little things that teachers can pull in off the shelf. But in the same spirit, which said you can't expect the teacher to go out and create an app or to go and crunch the data. You need to be able to drop something in that lets the teacher deliver excellent content that excites students with minimum effort. So that's something we're working on. Okay, so Suyen, what's something concrete you have in mind?
I think it's really important for all stakeholders, and I'm talking about the K-12 educational system, to learn more about the importance of data science. So I would say contact all the boards that like the State Board of Education, your school board, and tell them, especially parents, talk to your parents about it, because parents are really, really important in this journey. If you're a parent, or as a parent myself, I don't want my kid to be left behind. And we know increasingly, like Karina has said, we need a data literate workforce. And so this needs to be brought to the forefront. So contact those leaders that make those decisions.
What?
Yeah, so I'm working closely with the Public Interest Technology University Network, which is a partnership of about 50 universities on how we integrate the technology and non-technology training to solve social problems. And so through that, we have a grant program for universities to encourage them to have programs that go out in the community and do this work. And so I'm really excited to see this year's grants, the data-focused ones that are really looking at communities and at K through 12 schools to bring that type of learning and that type of expertise directly to the communities, directly to schools.
All right, Karina, you have the last word.
The pressure. So what can companies do? So a lot. I think companies are in a position to provide resources, obviously, when possible. Also to provide inspiration in terms of what are the problems, real world challenges, because one of the things that we do when we partner with universities is bringing a challenge from one of our customers. And nothing holds a student's attention more than a topic that's of interest to them. So, making it relevant, making sure that students and teachers understand, like I said, the future needs, the future skill sets that are required for you to be successful. And like I said, just partnerships. We're partnering now with Data Science for Everyone, but providing resources. Like I said, in our case, we do have a programming language, but also, just an inspiration for students of where you can be, what are the roles that will need you in the future.
Great, so thank you all. Thank you all for your questions. Your questions were too high quality and too voluminous to get through all of them. But as it says up there, come join us at 2 if you want to continue this conversation. We'll be there to talk more. And otherwise, have a great day. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.